Okay, we're here for this week's Torah portion, which is Chayei Sara, the life of Sarah. And we're going to be covering Genesis 23, 1 through 25, 18. And this passage is, the bulk of this passage is Isaac finding his wife, right? Through his servant. Okay. Yeah, that's about the introduction that we got. So, Rob, why don't you tell us your thoughts, sir?
Well, and the bookend also is the death of Abraham. So our Torah portion opens with the death of Sarah, and it's really important to Abraham to bury her at a specific place.
Yes.
And the local people. So this, how we were talking about Hebrews 11 and how it reinforces for us and really highlights for us the importance of recognizing that the patriarchs viewed themselves as sojourners.
Yeah.
Even though Abraham was told the land was his, he didn't just start building houses and say, this is my, he didn't build a castle and a throne room, and say, this is my land now and I am the ruler. Even though he knew by faith that it was his land. So we see a really curious thing in Genesis 23, which is Abraham, man of God, the through whom, right, this awesome, totally what we call unilateral covenant that we see all the way back from Genesis 12, Genesis 15, that God's going to do this. God's going to bless him and give him this land. That in spite of that, we saw with last week's Torah portion where he says, I'm just dust and ashes, but I just, suggest that the creator of heaven and earth, or the judge of all the earth, does righteousness and does not destroy the wicked, or does not destroy the righteous along with the wicked, right? So he's like so humble. I am dust and ashes. And then now here he comes before the Hittites in chapter 23 and takes the same type of humility, even though he is the heir. And this is amazing.
Right. It's his land. It's his land according to God,
and he wants
right?
to, not only they offer to give it to him, and he says, I need to pay for it.
There are two places in the Tanakh that are like my favorite. Like I think of them as my favorite little things that I see. One of them is when Absalom keeps trying to get a hold of his next door neighbor, and the guy won't listen to him. So he's like, "All right, fine, I'll just light your field on fire," right? And he lights his field on fire so that the guy will come talk to him. Another one is here because I see this as like almost my big fat Greek wedding, or just very like it's like Middle
Very
Eastern.
formal, or
Well, it's Middle Eastern hospitality of like, no. Hey, I'm going to give you the land. I'll give you the land. And he's like, no, let me pay for it. No, I would never tell you what the price of the land actually is. No, tell me. No, I couldn't tell you the price of a piece of land that costs 400 shekels. I would never do that. I mean, you can hear the play, and finally at the end, he's like, all right, it's 400 shekels. Like he's like, well, what's a field that's only 400 shekels? And Abraham's like, okay, it's 400 shekels. To give you the 400 shekels. It's just so, it's very, I don't know. The play out, it's very comical to me, the way the whole thing goes. Keep going.
Verse 15, it captures that. Adoni, right? My Lord, hear me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Go bury your dead. So he has to coax from Ephron, the Hittite. Abraham doesn't name the price. Could we learn? Is there something we could just learn about like business transaction and dealing here? Exactly. Like generally,
he waits for it.
Like Abraham, if we just view this from a marketplace negotiation, okay, business negotiation. You have a guy Abraham's with the consumer, right? He's on the side of the consumer, and Ephron is on the side of the business. Like he has the goods,
right?
But Abraham's like not going to name the price, because if he names too high of a price, then exactly. Ephron's like, hey, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But if he names too low of a price, he might insult. Right. He doesn't want to insult. So he wants But once he gives it, so
Yeah.
also, not that this isn't just a business transaction. This is a very significant piece of land that not only Sarah is buried, but ultimately Abraham and Jacob and Leah, etc. So Rachel, of course, is buried elsewhere, on the near Bethlehem. But what we see is that he leaves clean. Like you named the number, I gave it to you.
Here we go. It's mine now.
We're good.
Yeah.
We're good. And it's done publicly. So that means, let it be known, basically, that this sale has happened, and it's like a public knowledge now, accepted by all. That's where, like in verse 18, like it was done to all who entered at the gates, right?
Yeah. It was a legal transaction. Yeah.
Legal transaction. And this is the oldest, like even in the Herodian era. So you know how King Herod, the Herod of when Yeshua was born. So Herod the Great, who died shortly thereafter, the one who sent to do the massacre of innocents at Bethlehem, for example. He is known to have rebuilt the temple, right, and added all this stuff. And he built port cities at Caesarea, right, and the Herodium and Masada. He really built up Masada at the Judean desert, at the Sea of, the Dead Sea. But he also built up at Hebron the Cave of the Patriarchs. So that means that in Yeshua's day, people would go to Machpelah, to Hebron, as a site of religious pilgrimage to the grave of the patriarchs. And there's structure to this day that is said to come from the Herodian period, and he made it look kind of like the temple. And so archaeologists study the structure of the building at Machpelah, that is at Hebron, as maybe reflecting some of the architectural and structural features that were part of Herod's temple complex, even though the temple, of course, was destroyed. So this, just to point out that this, what we read about in Genesis 23, and then at the end of our Torah portion, bookended with Abraham's death and burial there, that this is a significant location, like through the time of Yeshua. There's a lot of newer stuff, that comes later, like, oh, this is where Peter's vision was. It's here. Oh, no, Peter's vision happened over here in Jaffa, for example. But this is one place that there's no dispute. There's no alternative.
These are the actual rocks that were turned, that Satan tempted Yeshua to turn to bread, right?
Yeah. So it's like this is one place where there's no contest, right? I think like the prophet Jonah, there's like 3 burial sites, like one in the Middle East, one in Mesopotamia, one in Galilee, and one in Judea, right? So there's these places where you have a figure's grave that is marked in multiple different locations, because they all, Maimonides, the famous Jewish medieval scholar, he's got a grave in Tiberias and one in Cairo. So it's like ours is real. We've already got one, kind of thing. So yeah, this is really interesting. Actually. Like this is undisputed from the time of King Herod. Now to this day, also I'm kind of riffing along on this, but it is divided into a Muslim side and a Jewish side. So, and they don't touch, they don't see each other. So in other words, they've accommodated the both site religions of the Cave of the Patriarchs so that Jews can go in and pray, and Muslims go in and pray, and they don't see each other, but they're at the same locations. So this is it's a famous historic, monumental place that to this day is marked.
So one of the things that I noticed, and we're talking about like the death of Sarah, and then the death of Abraham, and talking about the covenant, the main thing that I noticed and maybe I'm focused where I shouldn't be, but one of the things I notice is that Abraham gets we get to the end of Abraham's life, and it says he married somebody else. Excuse me, real quick. He married somebody else. He had more children, right? And so the fact is that it wasn't just Ishmael that God could have had the covenant go through, right? There's a number of children that come from Abraham's line that could have technically carried on the covenant, but God didn't want it that way. And so what struck me is it actually is more specific to Sarah. The covenant had to come through Sarah because she was the one who was advanced in age. She was the one that was going to not believe it and laugh, right? And this ultimately is a picture of the virgin birth, right? She is. We've talked about this already in these discussions about how the Messiah comes from a woman who. It's unnatural means. There's no man involved. And in this one, and in this case, the foreshadowing of this is from a woman who is beyond years. And so it just struck me that the line or the line of the covenant was more specific not to Abraham, but actually to Sarah. That's all I got.
There's another aspect to this too with these other children and Sarah and Isaac is towards the end of our Torah, because remember our Torah portion kind of has bookends, right? Death of Sarah, acquisition of Machpelah, burial of Sarah, and the end of our Torah portion is Abraham's death, his burial at Machpelah. Okay, so those are kind of the bookends. But if looking at Genesis 25, starting with verse 5, after mentioning these other children, Vayiten Abraham et kol asher lo le Yitzchak. Abraham gave all that was his to Isaac, except then we got to keep reading verse 6. But to Abraham's sons by concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living. It says Be'odenu chai, while he was still living, but he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward. Okay, so while he was still living, just hear me out. So then it says Abraham breathed his last, Isaac and Ishmael buried him, etc. But then look at verse 11. It says, and it was after the death of Abraham that God blessed Isaac, his son. And what I'm seeing here is that earlier it says that God blessed Abraham in all things. God blessed Abraham in all things. Abraham gave everything that was his to Isaac. I don't think that, but that didn't happen yet. So it was his. So let me go through this one more time. What I'm trying to say is that Genesis 25:5 gives us the big picture. God gave, or Abraham gave everything that was his to Isaac. However, verse 6 says that he gave gifts while he was still living.
Right.
Why does it say while he was still living? Because I think verse 5 isn't fulfilled until Abraham dies, because we don't have God actually blessing Abraham until verse 11. After the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac. In other words, Abraham, it doesn't matter that Isaac's still alive and that he's the continuer of the covenant. The blessing is on Abraham. Only, and then Isaac is just under that covering. Only when Abraham dies, God blesses Isaac. And now Isaac is the flesh and blood human who is bearing that covenant blessing. It is now officially passed to him. But as long as Abraham was still alive, yes, everything he could say to Isaac confidently, everything I have is yours. However,
it doesn't
after Abraham dies, then it says God blessed his son Isaac. And that means now Isaac is now the bearer of the representative of the covenant. And which is a fulfillment. It shows God's faithfulness beyond the life of Sarah, beyond the life of Abraham. So Abraham dies knowing, full confidence that God's word has come true, that God said way back in chapter 17, Sarah, I know she's been barren for 80 something years. She's going to have a son. You're going to call him Isaac. I'm going to continue my covenant with him and beyond and his offspring. Abraham dies with the full knowledge of God's faithfulness. But Abraham doesn't see verse 11. This blessing that now is on Isaac shows us, the readers, those who are studying the Torah, of God's faithfulness. Abraham's not around anymore to see whether God's going to.
What I hear you saying is this too. I mean, and maybe I'll put it just a little bit different way. The blessing that Abraham has, in Abraham's eyes, much of it is possession wise, right? I mean, he had over 300 fighting men. Abraham's wealth was enormous. I mean, he had an army. His household had their own army. And so, I mean, we're not talking about some guy living, I mean, yes, he was a Bedouin, he lives in a tent, right? But at the same time, he's not just like in a camping tent like we're thinking. This dude was rich. He had all this stuff, right?
Well, so he has a network of people who trust him and respect him, and he can call on them even if they don't dwell with him. He can send messengers, and they'll come to
And we see his best. As we already talked about, we see his business acumen when he doesn't name the price, right? So he's willing to like, he's a good businessman as well. So what I hear you saying is Abraham blesses his son and his other sons with possessions, but it's not the possessions that are the true blessing. It's only when Abraham dies that the blessing of the covenant can actually pass from Abraham to Isaac. And this is the real blessing. It's something that can't be held. It's something that's not, you can't see it. It's not tangible. Like, it's something that only God can give. And so it passes from Abraham to Isaac at the death of Abraham. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, yep. And also, so then what's in the very middle of our Torah portion, you already mentioned it at the outset, is Abraham's confidence that that God already has a wife for his son.
Right.
Because, and then he sends his servant. And he makes his servant swear an oath that he will do such and such to bring in. He says Isaac can't leave. Isaac stays in the land. That's another footnote here. Isaac is the only of the three patriarchs who never leaves the promised land. Jacob, of course, dies in Egypt, right? And Abraham comes from outside the land. He keeps Isaac in the land. Abraham does, but he won't he says, "You're not getting your wife from here." Like, he tells his servant, "You go back to my brother Nahor and his whole family, and there you will get a wife, and the Lord will guide you and bless you and show you kindness, and you will bring back a wife for Isaac." Abraham's confident that God's going to do this, and it makes his servant swear, and his servant swearing is nervous about this. He's like, "Okay, but like, what happens? Like, if I can't do it?" He says, "Well, then if the Lord does not provide, then you will be free from your oath." In other words, Abraham gives his servant an out, because the servant has fear of God. He's like, "Oh my, how can I swear to my master that I'll do this and bring back a wife when maybe the Lord won't actually do it?" But Abraham is so confident. Where does Abraham get his confidence that God already has a wife picked out for Isaac? It's in the same promise, back to Genesis 17, that Isaac, and I will continue my covenant with Isaac and with his seed after him. That means he's going to have babies.
Yeah.
That means God already has a wife. It's pretty mind-blowing. And so, of course, Rebecca comes back, and she's willing, right? And it's pretty awesome. And there's hints in there in Genesis 24 that the Lord indeed prepared Rebecca her whole life for this moment where she would be recognized by Abraham's servant, and she would willingly leave and go yes, without seeing Isaac. She's never seen him. She's like, "Yeah, I'll go."
Well, yeah, but then the movie moment, right, when she sees him coming in the field, and she's like, "Oh, who's that?" Right? I think once again she
falls off the camel. It's funny.
Exactly. Once again, we kind of see ancient Near Eastern culture, and I say ancient because even today, I don't think that we would have people who are still engrossed in arranged marriages still wouldn't have the same kind of reaction to the servant comes to the well, and what he does is he puts jewelry on her, right? He puts gold on her. And this right here is a signal. As soon as the brother sees this and he runs and hey, something's going on here. They bring Rebecca back. She's got gold on her already. It's like he's already staked a claim almost. Like, hey, and they haven't even met this guy. And now within the Near Eastern culture today, and even a lot of the Arab countries, hospitality is something that is so high on the list. It's not like it is here. If there are videos online of certain people going and seeing if they can find someone who will let them stay the night. They don't know them. They're just going to go.
Right.
And that happens, right? Or, how much money do you have to spend in, certain places? And the answer, certain Arab countries, the answer is none, because everyone will say, oh, you're a foreigner, come in, I'll feed you. Even at restaurants, don't worry about it. We won't let you pay. So the hospitality is really high here. So it's not surprising to me that they're like, hey, we got a place for you, not a problem. Come in. We got straw for your camels and everything like that. But the idea that he stakes a claim on Rebecca before any of the family sees him or knows who he is, and then they're like, oh, they're excited about it. It's not like, who's this weird dude who just showed up from Canaan. That, to me, the whole thing is clearly orchestrated by the Lord. So
Absolutely.
Anyway,
and Abraham has that confidence, and it's pretty awesome. Okay, I one other thing that just back to the beginning of our Torah portion, it's Chayei Sara, the life of Sarah. Some say, oh well, it's the word life, Chaim in Hebrew is plural, and so they can translate it the lives of Sarah.
Lives of
and
Sarah,
then it's
right.
like, well, is that like thinking about the Sarai that we're introduced to at the end of Genesis 11, where she's barren, has no children, the situations of her telling people, yeah, Abraham's my brother, I'm his sister, kind of thing, where it was kind of strange to try to negotiate some sort of sense of safety in strange situations. The situation with Hagar, have a baby with Hagar, but then the hostility that comes between Hagar and Sarai, and then the promise that Sarai's going to have a baby, and she gets a new name, but that she laughs, she denies she's laughed. So in a way, you start thinking about, all these, what have we learned about this woman? But particularly moving for me is verse 2, because it says she died in Kiryat Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. So, Yeshua promises in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And so, and we know that like Yeshua wept at Lazarus' tomb.
That's what I was thinking.
So like, what do you think about this? Like, what do you think about the twofold nature of like the righteous who weep because of death? Because grief is a real thing. Like grief is something that we feel because we love, we cherish somebody, we cherish a relationship, we cherish a loved one. And, even the other day, my wife was visiting her best friend, and they were just, and her dog was barking. And so she went and put her in the bedroom. It's like a 3-year-old German Shepherd. And then, my wife's friend's like, it's weird that he's barking so much. And she went and checked on him, told him to calm down. And they're just talking about life and stuff. Well, then she goes in and checks again, and the dog just collapses and dies right there. So and they're at the house alone, and they're just weeping. They're trying to get this, this is a beloved family pet. And now it's like, and it's their, one of the kids' pet who's at school. So they have to like, all these things happen, and there's just a lot of weeping and grief. And this is just a beloved animal. But like here you think about Abraham's story that he has with Sarah.
Right.
Like think about
what they've been
Sarah
through
lived
together.
100, yeah, if she's 127, so they've been together over 100 years, right? And they've been through how many years of waiting? Wondering about the covenant promise. Maybe it will be through Hagar, right? And it's like, no, it's not through Hagar. Waiting more, and then Genesis 22, the binding of Isaac, and like think about, some say that's why Sarah died, because we don't have a record of her ever seeing Isaac again, and thinking that, oh, she died of a broken heart. That's midrash, of course. We don't know. But the point is, it's clear. The Torah says plainly that Abraham mourned for her and wept for her. And that's real, right? He's not faking it. This is from the core depth of his soul. Yet at the same time, he is blessed by all things, blessed by God in all things, it says. So, and I thought of, Yeshua weeping at the tomb of Lazarus. Yeshua's going to raise him from the dead.
Right.
And people see Yeshua weeping and they say, wow, he loved him. Like, and I just wonder, like, what do you think of that? Like this weird situation of being in this world and having genuine emotions that the Lord himself acknowledges. Blessed are those who mourn. You'll be comforted. There is a time for mourning, it says in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes. There's a time for mourning. And it comes to an end, right? It's not forever, but it's real. And at the same time, though, we have a joy and a hope of resurrection, and right. That this is only a temporary goodbye. And so
I think that there's something inside of us. There's something inside of us that knows that death is wrong. In other words, death comes from the fall. Death comes from
wages of sin is death. Yeah, that's right.
Right. And so I think that there is something ingrained in human beings to know that death, and you brought up the death of this dog. I mean, obviously, the death of an animal is different than the death of a human being, right. Of course. And but at the same time, even that death there's something that inside of human beings understands and knows that death is painful, it's wrong, it's not. And so I think that instinctually, there is pain there. What the thing that you said that really strikes me is that Yeshua, he mourns for Lazarus, knowing that he's going to raise him from the dead. There's still a pain there. There's still a grief and a loss. It's real.
There. It's not fake. He's not putting on a show, right? This is genuine. Right. There's something about the way God made it. There's a genuine connection with the sisters who are mourning, Lazarus' sisters, his own love for Lazarus, and like you just pointed out, the fact of the consequences of sin in the world, the fact of the right. consequences, of the sin in the garden and the fall is part of this reality. Yeah. Some have suggested, why when a woman gives birth, that there's a commandment in the Torah to take a sin offering.
Right.
To the tabernacle or to the temple. And the idea is, and even it says that even, Mary did this, right?
Right.
In the Gospel of Luke for Yeshua. So a sin offering, and it says 2 turtle doves, right? Because they were poor, but it says to fulfill the law of the Lord. So that even Yeshua himself had it's a sin offering offered on his behalf, which must have been acceptable worship. It's Mary, right. And it's right. It's at the tabernacle. Or at the temple rather. So what is the sin offering? Does it mean that there was sin? Did Mary sin? No, that's not the point. I think it has to do with, it's an acknowledgement of sin in the world, even at the beginning of a life, even at the beginning of a birth of an infant born into the covenant. In Luke's case, he's talking about Yeshua specifically, but this would be true of all observant Jewish families. When there was a temple, was the mother would do this. So, what is the significance of the sin offering that the Torah commands in the book of Leviticus concerning the newborn, male or female? And I think it's recognizing, it's a statement that sin is in the world, and that this birth will be bookended by by a death because of that sin. That's my thought on it. We're never told explicitly why in the Torah the sin offering is accompanied with the birth of a child. We're just told that it is. So I'm just speculating, sharing my rationality for my opinion on that.
I love it. I think we're gonna cut it there, and we hope once again, these talks about the Torah portion are meant to hopefully help you, help your family, help your community, and if you're a leader in a community, to help you spark some ideas so that you can, springboard off of them. It's obviously these aren't meant to be exhaustive in any way, shape, or form, but just ideas here and there, maybe a couple of things that you haven't thought about, and that will help further conversation for you and for your study and for your family and your congregation. All right, we will be back next week with another one, and we hope that this has been beneficial. We'll see you next time.